The sun hangs low over a dirt road in northern Spain. Dust rises with every step. Flies circle the heads of tired travelers, men, women, a few children walking single file through the summer heat. They've been on the road for 3 weeks. Their destination is still weeks away, and right now, all anyone can think about is water. Ahead, the path curves toward a shallow stream. It runs beside a small village, pooling near where cattle have gathered to drink. The water looks clear enough. One pilgrim breaks from the group, kneels at the bank, and cups the water to his lips. It tastes fine. It smells fine. He drinks deeply. 2 days later, he can barely walk. His stomach cramps without warning. He's losing fluids faster than he can replace them. His legs tremble. His skin grows pale. The group slows, then stops. They cannot carry him. They cannot leave him. And they cannot afford to wait. This is how a pilgrimage ends, not at a shrine, but on the side of the road, undone by something invisible. Dysentery. Severe diarrhea. Call it what you will. In the medieval world, it was one of the most common ways for a journey to collapse. It didn't require an enemy. It didn't require a storm. It only required one drink from the wrong source, and the traveler's body would betray them within hours. Here's the question that should bother you. Thousands of pilgrims made these journeys every year. Some walked for months. Many were not young, not wealthy, not trained soldiers. And yet enough of them survived to make pilgrimage one of the defining activities of medieval Christian life. How? They had no antibiotics, no germ theory, no bottled water, no laboratory tests, no understanding of bacteria, parasites, or contamination at the microbial level. So how did they not all perish along the way? Most people assume medieval travelers were constantly sick, helpless, stumbling through a world of filth with nothing but prayer and luck. That assumption is wrong. What the pilgrimage routes of Europe actually developed over centuries was something more remarkable. A distributed, practical system of water intelligence. Rules passed from traveler to traveler. Habits enforced by experience. Institutions designed to reduce risk without ever naming the threat. They didn't know what caused the sickness, but they knew, often, how to avoid it. Let's be clear about what dysentery-like illness actually meant in practical terms. Forget the grim details. Focus on the logistics. A traveler struck by severe intestinal illness would rapidly lose fluids. Dehydration would set in within a day. Strength would fade. The ability to walk, to carry a pack, to keep pace with a group, all of it would disappear. And in a world without IV, drips, or oral rehydration salts, that weakness could spiral. A pilgrim who couldn't move, couldn't reach shelter, couldn't reach food, couldn't reach the next monastery or hospice. The danger wasn't just the illness itself, it was everything the illness prevented. Now consider the water. Medieval Europe was not a wasteland, but it was not clean by modern standards. Rivers served as highways for trade, for transport, and for waste. Towns dumped refuse into flowing water. Livestock drank and defecated near the banks. Shallow wells could be fouled by nearby latrines or underground seepage. Stagnant ponds bred what we now know are pathogens, though no one then would have used that word. And perhaps, worst of all, the most convenient water sources, those right beside the road, near villages, easy to access, were often the most dangerous. A pilgrim could not see the threat, but the threat was there, waiting in every cup. So what did they do? The first layer of protection was source selection. Experienced travelers learned to prefer springs over rivers. A spring emerges from the ground, filtered through rock and soil, less exposed to surface contamination. Fast-moving water was preferred over slow or stagnant pools. Upstream locations were safer than downstream, particularly downstream from any settlement, any field, any grazing herd. Pilgrims who had walked the routes before would warn newcomers, not that stream. That one's too close to the tannery. That pond sits downhill from the farms. Go to the spring on the hill instead. It takes longer. It's harder to reach, but it's the water that doesn't make you sick. This wasn't science. It was pattern recognition, generations of travelers noting where people fell ill and where they didn't. The second layer was sensory evaluation. Travelers checked clarity. They smelled the water. They tasted small amounts before drinking deeply. Did it have an odor? Was it murky? Did it leave a strange sensation on the tongue? These checks were imperfect. Many deadly contaminants are invisible and odorless, but they weren't useless either. Grossly polluted water often does show signs: algae blooms, cloudiness, a sulfurous smell, an off taste. Experienced pilgrims developed a rough sense of what to avoid, even if they couldn't articulate why. And when no good water could be found, they waited, or they rationed. Serious travelers carried water, not in the lightweight bottles we know, but in leather flasks, ceramic jugs, or animal bladders. Heavy, awkward, prone to leakage, but essential. A pilgrim who carried water from a trusted source could pass by 3 bad streams without stopping. They could endure a longer stretch between safe wells. They could avoid the desperate choice drink now or collapse from thirst. That ability to wait, to ration, to carry their safety with them was itself a form of protection. And there's another factor most people overlook entirely: timing. Many experienced travelers moved during the cooler hours, early morning, late evening, partly to avoid heat exhaustion, but partly because less heat meant less sweating, less thirst, less urgent need for water. A pilgrim who walked at midday under the summer sun might drain their flask by noon and be forced to drink from whatever stream they found. A pilgrim who rested during the worst heat could stretch their supply, reach a monastery, or wait until a better source appeared. The discipline of timing was also a discipline of survival. But here is where the story turns unexpected. The greatest protection medieval pilgrims had was not the water they drank, it was what they drank instead of water. Ale, beer, small beer, cider in some regions, wine where it was available. These beverages were ubiquitous in medieval daily life not because everyone was a drunkard, but because everyone, on some level, understood that fermented drinks were safer. The brewing process involved boiling water. That step, though no one knew why it mattered, destroyed many of the organisms that caused illness. Fermentation added a layer of acidity and alcohol that further discouraged spoilage. The result was a drink that could be stored longer, transported more safely, and consumed with far less risk than raw river water. Now, historians urge caution here. Not all beer was boiled thoroughly. Not all fermented drinks were equally safe. And pilgrims on the road couldn't always access fresh ale. But the pattern is clear across medieval sources. Where brewing or fermentation was part of food culture, waterborne illness appears to have been less devastating. When travelers stopped at inns and monasteries, they were often served ale, not water. And that choice, made for reasons of taste, tradition, and availability, may have saved countless lives without anyone realizing it. The same logic applied to warm infusions and broths. At hospices and way stations, pilgrims might receive a bowl of broth or a mug of heated herbal drink. The heating itself was protective. Boiling water even briefly reduced the microbial load. The traveler consuming that broth was getting hydration that had passed through fire. They didn't know it was the heat that mattered. But the heat mattered anyway. This brings us to the institutions, the quiet backbone of medieval pilgrimage. The routes to major shrines like Santiago de Compostela, Canterbury, or Rome were not empty wilderness. They were networked. Monasteries spaced along the roads offered hospitality to travelers. Hospices provided beds, meals, and often basic medical care. Charitable organizations distributed bread and ale to pilgrims who could not afford to pay. These institutions weren't just kindnesses, they were infrastructure. A monastery might maintain its own well dug deep, kept clean, protected from surface runoff. A hospice might serve food prepared in a central kitchen, cooked over fire, less likely to carry contamination than whatever a traveler scavenged on the road. Guests might be given a designated cup, reducing the spread of illness from shared vessels. The rules varied by place and century, but the underlying logic was consistent: control the environment, reduce the risk. Historians note that pilgrimage routes developed this infrastructure over generations. It wasn't planned by a central authority. It emerged because pilgrims who survived spread the word. This monastery has clean water. That hospice serves hot food. Avoid the inn near the bridge. 3 people fell ill there last summer. The information traveled the roads as surely as the Pilgrims did. Now consider food. This is often overlooked in discussions of medieval travel, but it's inseparable from the water problem. Pilgrims didn't just drink contaminated water. They ate food that had touched it. A vegetable washed in a fouled stream. A bowl rinsed in river water. A piece of fruit handled by someone who hadn't washed their hands. The contamination could enter the body through a dozen invisible routes. The safest foods were simple. Dry bread, hard, durable, unlikely to harbor moisture-loving organisms. Aged cheese preserved by salt and fermentation. Salted meat when available. Cooked meals served hot. These weren't exciting, they weren't varied, but they were survivable. Pilgrims who understood the risks avoided raw foods of uncertain origin. They ate what had been dried, salted, smoked, or heated. Bland. Yes, but bland was the price of reaching the shrine. And then there were the small behaviors, the hygiene practices that accumulated into protection. Hand washing was not unknown in the medieval world. Rituals of cleanliness existed in religious and domestic contexts. A careful traveler might rinse their hands before eating, at least when clean water and circumstances allowed. They might carry their own cup or spoon, avoiding the communal vessels that passed from mouth to mouth. They might drink vinegar-diluted water or other acidic beverages, not knowing that acidity could slow spoilage, but knowing from experience that such drinks seem to keep better and cause less trouble. And there was social enforcement. Experienced pilgrims warned novices. Groups developed internal rules: don't drink from that stream. Wait for the well at the next village. Don't accept water from strangers unless you see them drink first. These habits weren't written in books. They were transmitted through repetition, through example, through the quiet authority of those who had completed the journey before. Let's pause here for a moment of tension. Picture the scene. A group of 20 pilgrims stands at a crossroads. The sun is brutal. They've been walking since dawn. Ahead, 2 options. To the left, a stream runs beside the road, easily reached, shaded by trees, visible from where they stand. But there are cattle in a field just upstream, and the water moves slowly, almost pooling near the bank. To the right, a path climbs a rocky hill. One of the older travelers says there's a spring at the top, cold, clear, fed by rain filtering through stone. But it's a detour, half a mile up, half a mile back. An hour lost, maybe more, when legs are already aching and the day is slipping away. Someone argues for the stream. It looks fine. It smells fine. We're already behind schedule. We'll never reach the hospice before dark if we climb that hill. Someone else argues for the spring. You've all heard the stories. You know what happens when you drink from a stream like that. One bad drink and the journey is over. The group splits, debates, grumbles, and then they climb the hill. An hour later, they're back on the road. Their legs hurt. Their progress is slower. But the water they drank was cold and clean, drawn from a source untouched by livestock or settlement. No one falls ill that night. The journey continues. That was the hidden cost of survival. Not heroism, not faith, just discipline, discomfort, and the willingness to take the harder path when it mattered most. But the system didn't always hold. In famine years, when food was scarce and desperation set in, travelers ate and drank whatever they could find. In times of war, when hospices were abandoned or roads became dangerous, the infrastructure collapsed. In drought, when even the trusted springs ran dry, pilgrims had no choice but to drink from whatever sources remained. Overcrowding at popular shrines during feast days could overwhelm the sanitation capacity of small towns, turning safe stopping points into vectors of illness. When the system failed, the consequences were severe. A weakened traveler became a burden on the group. Delays meant missing the window of good weather, arriving at shrines after they closed for the season, or running out of money before reaching the destination. Illness led to exposure, led to further illness, led sometimes to a journey that simply never ended travelers who set out for holy places and never returned home. Sources suggest that medieval physicians and travelers alike recognized certain patterns, even without understanding their causes. Accounts describe warnings about specific waters, recommendations to boil or heat drinks for the sick, and observations linking crowded conditions to outbreaks of flux and fever. Archaeological evidence indicates that monasteries often invested in wells and water management far beyond what their own populations required, designed to serve the streams of pilgrims who passed through their gates. Later scholarship has pieced together these fragments, noting that pilgrimage routes functioned as complex systems, not random journeys through hostile terrain. What does this mean for how we understand the medieval world? It means we have to shatter what we think we know. Medieval pilgrims did not need to understand germ theory to be effective at avoiding illness. They built practical heuristics, rules of thumb, patterns of behavior, habits that reduced risk without ever naming the mechanism. They relied on infrastructure, not government infrastructure, but the organic network of monasteries, hospices, inns, and charitable organizations that grew up to serve travelers over centuries. They learned from each other, generation to generation, route to route, mistake to mistake. The real survival advantage was not toughness, it was not faith, it was not luck. It was behavior, routine, institutional support. The quiet accumulation of knowledge passed from one traveler to the next, never written in a medical text, never blessed by a scholar, but tested on the roads every single day. The pilgrim who reached the shrine did not arrive by accident. They arrived because somewhere along the way, at an inn, at a monastery, at a crossroads debate about which stream to drink from, someone made a choice that kept them alive. Often, they never knew how close they came to disaster. Often, they never knew what invisible threat they had avoided. But the system knew. The roots remembered. And the next generation of pilgrims inherited that knowledge, embedded in habits they followed without ever questioning why. The journey to the sacred site was won not by faith alone, but by quiet logistics and hard-earned knowledge passed down through centuries, tested by thousands, and invisible to everyone who benefited from it.